The very first video I ever made here on YouTube was on how to make a nav bar with a cool little hover effect, and I really like that video, and it's actually my most popular video, which is kind of cool because it was the very first one I ever did. But it's a little bit, I used floats and it wasn't responsive, and I get lots of questions on that video about doing some more interesting things with it. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm back! It's been 3 weeks and honestly, I miss making these videos, so I'm really happy to be back. Real life was just crazy. It was insane. Now I finally have some time to breathe. And because of that, it also means that I have time to make these videos again, which is great. So thank you for being patient with me. If this is your first video and you didn't even know I was on a break, or you're watching this in the future, welcome. If you don't already know, my name is Kevin, and here at my channel I make videos where we explore how to make the web and how to make it look good while we're at it, with a new video every single week. Well, almost every single week. As I just said, I took a little break, but for the most part, it's every single week. So as I mentioned, my very first video, I made this nav bar here that you can see on the screen, and I think it looks good. I really do like it, but it's not responsive, as I said, and I think it really could be improved, and we're going to do a lot of good things to improve it, but I'm not just going to go back in and refactor it. We're going to go in and just rip it all apart, and well, no, we're not ripping it apart, we're starting from zero. I'm just going to start from scratch. We're going to build it up. I'm going to make it responsive. We're going to have a nice little, like a clicky box that's going to go up and down with no JavaScript, so I think that's going to be cool. We'll throw a little CSS variable in there for fun. We're going to be using CSS Grid. We're going to be using flexbox. We're going to be bringing it to the modern times and modern CSS that we have now. So I will be looking at a lot of little things along the way that I've explored in more detail in my other videos. So down in the description below, there'll be links to a lot of my other videos, just ones that go more in depth on some of the topics that I'm briefly going over. So in this video, even if you're not sure what a CSS variable is, you'll be able to follow along no problem, but if you want more details on it, they'll be down in the description. Also, you might notice that it's a longer video, so what I've done is I put timestamps down in the description as well. I actually ran a poll on whether you guys would like to have one big long video or lots of little videos, and I was surprised that it was a pretty even split. The lots of little videos actually won, but I just thought that because it was so close and because of the topic of this video, it would make more sense to have one big long one just with some timestamps along the way. So that's what we're going to be doing. The way that works is if you go and look in the description, you'll see the times, but they're actually linked. So if you click on, say, the third one down, you click on the little timestamp and it's going to bring you exactly to there in the video. So if you don't have time to watch the whole thing at once, that's fine, because you can just come back later on, go, oh, I was at adding in the pseudo-elements, and click on that, and it will bring you to that part of the video right away. So it's little bookmark typey things. With all that out of the way, I think it's time we get into this. Let's go rock it. Now, first things first, we've got to write some markup. Luckily, it's pretty easy to do for this. And you'll notice I am in CodePen, so the link to this is down in the description below if you want to go and check out my code and play around with it as you follow along in the video or afterwards. I do have a little bit of something here. This is just a placeholder where some actual content will go, so we can see what it looks like with content once we've built this out. So let's start just by making a nice big header here. Close header. Inside my header, I'm just going to use an H1 with a class of logo on it, so we can have our logo, which I don't actually have one, so I'm just going to write logo in there for now for a little bit of a placeholder for where we could be putting a logo. And then we need our actual navigation. So I'm going to come in here and make a nav, close my nav off, and we're going to do this with an unordered list because this is what you'll usually find out in the real world. So for this we need a list item, and in our list item we will be putting in an href. We have nowhere for it to go now, but hopefully you would actually have somewhere for this to be going to. And for my href, the first one can be home, close A, and close li. And just to make my life a little bit easier, let's copy this one and paste it in there a few times so we have a few different links. Let's say it's about, we'll do a blog, and we'll do the contact. There we go. So the main reason again with this is just so we can see what happens sort of when we scroll, so it gives us a bit more of a realistic look. That's why I added this whole content thing down here. And that's it for the markup. It's nice and simple there. So now with that done, we can start coding it up. We're going to start with the mobile view, and then we'll move up to the desktop screen sizes once we're finished with that. So I'm going to just take this, and we don't actually need to be looking at this anymore. So I'm going to bring up my CSS. Now you'll see that I have some styling here already. So up here, I'm just bringing my Google font. Here, I'm setting up a CSS custom property or a CSS variable here at the top. If you've never seen these, I do have a series on how they work, but for the very basics of it, you'll very easily be able to follow along for this video. And once you see me using it, I think you'll quickly understand exactly how it works. Here I have a reset for my box sizing, which I do on pretty much all my projects. And then I just have some basic styles. We'll hit my content section and just some basic styles here on my body, just so we have somewhere where we're starting off with. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave all that at the top there, and then I'm going to come down here just because I will be showing this. And let's just put in a little comment here saying navigation styles start here. And we'll work from here on out. So the very first thing I have here is my header. So let's style that up. So I have my header, and right away we're going to use that variable that I was just talking about. So to use it, I have to write var and then open and close my parentheses, and then I write the name that I created, so background. And you can see that color that I used, where is it? Right here. So this RGBA value is getting brought in right there. So this will come in more handy once we start reusing this, or if we do decide to reuse it in different places, or if we need to change it later on. What else do we need to do? I want to do a text align center on this. And I'm going to do a position fixed. I've had a lot of questions about how to do this, so it's nice and easy. You do a position fixed. And then for now, I'm just going to do a width of 100%. So now if I scroll, you can see that it stays there. And because I'm using an RGBA value, you can see that there is a little bit of transparency in there. So we can play with that number a little bit on how transparent you want it, but I think that looks nice. Now one thing, because this is position fixed, just to make sure that it's always on top of everything, we can give it a really nice big Z index. Something like that. It depends on how you're using your Z indexes and everything, but a nice big number just to ensure that it's always all the way on top of everything else. So that's good. Now let's actually get inside our header. So the very first thing we have is our logo, and because this is an H1 with some text, I'm going to say that the margin is 0 on it. So actually I don't think I need to style anything on it, but if you wanted to, just know that the space around it right now is being created by the margin. So it is possible that you might want to reset that at one point, or change the spacing around it, because this is sort of going to decide on how tall our whole navigation is, since it's the biggest element inside of my navigation. But for now, I'm just going to not even bother putting anything. So right now, it's starting to look good, but my navigation's in the wrong place. What we want is to bring it over to the side here, because eventually it will move up and down with a thing that we're going to click on. Now, I haven't done the markup for that yet. I'm saving that for a little bit after. Just because it's going to make more sense once everything is set up to add that little bit of markup in there. We're almost there too. So let's go and look at my nav first of all. So I always work from the outside in. So let's start with the whole nav itself. So I'm going to use a position absolute on this. So because this has a position fixed already on it, this position absolute will be relative to where the overall positioning of this is, which will make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to do a text align left. Because my text isn't in the middle, it looks weird if it's centered off on the side here. So let's do a text align left on that. The top's already, I think, at the right spot, but I'm going to say top 100%. So again, that's relative to this. So if I did like top 50%, just to look at it, the top of this, well, there's a little bit of margin on the top, so of the list itself. But the top of this is lining up pretty much with the middle of this. And I don't want it to line up with the middle. I want it to line up underneath that. So that's why top, we're moving 100% away from the top, which is here. So 100% of the way down. And then let's just do a left of 0 so I can control exactly where it's going to be. You'll say it doesn't look left 0. We do have padding on here as well because of my nav UL, which we'll look at in a second. I think that's all we need on there. So let's keep going. So let's look at our nav UL next. So on my nav UL, what do we need? We need to do, this is where the margin 0, padding 0, and I'll do a list style of none. That gets rid of the bullet points and all of that. And now you can see it's actually lining up with the top, and it's actually all the way on the side there. Good. And now we can do my nav LI. And on my nav LI, I want to spread them out. So it's at a margin bottom, I don't know, 1em, just to spread them out a little bit. And I'll do a margin left of 1em as well to give it some space on the side here. Now, this is where did I really need to reset this exactly? And this margin here could actually be up on the UL. It just depends on how you like to work. There's no, I think anyway, in my opinion, it's just preference on where you're doing this to move it around. But I like just resetting that, and then I like positioning my list items sort of like this, because when we go into the other view, we're going to be playing with the margin left as well on these to space them out when they're actually one next to each other instead of on top of each other like this. To start making it look a little bit better, my nav A. So my nav A color, let's make it color white, text decoration of none. We could probably make the font size a bit bigger, font size of 2 rem. Something like that. That looks a little bit nicer. I'll do a text transform of uppercase. If you've never used ems or rems, by the way, they're pretty simple to use. And I'd encourage you to start learning a little bit more about them. I do have a video on that. I'll link to it in the description below as well. So that looks okay. We need a little bit of a hover effect on these though, I think. So I'll do a nav A hover. So on this, I think we'll just change the color, say over to black instead of white. I know I can't see it now, and I just realized I need my background. So this background color here, I want it to also be down there. So that would be on the nav itself. I just completely forgot. So here we can come in and do background and use my variable of background. And I guess I'll also need to do a width of 100%. There we go. Cool. So that is, I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Now, just to really reinforce why I'm using this variable background instead of just putting the number in. So here I have the background and here I have the background, and potentially you'd be having it in other places as well. Maybe background wouldn't be the best name if you were using it in other places. But let's just say I came in here and I change it in this one spot. The color changes in both of them. And actually, I like that color better, so I'm going to leave that alone. But let's just put this to 0 to really change it. So you can see I'm using this color in 2 different places, and by changing it here, and this should make it black, 0, it's changing it in both of them at the same time. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, I think I'm going to stick with this. I like the more vibrant color that I just got by doing that. So I'm going to stick with that. Also, sorry, I'm scrolling around, but here, if you wanted to make it no more transparent, I could turn it off. I could come here, do 0.5 and make it more transparent, and it's doing every instance of this all at the same time. So that's why I set this up here. It just makes life a little bit easier instead of trying to remember hex codes or RGBA values. Cool. So my menu is there, but obviously I can't actually toggle it right now. And that's a big part of having a mobile navigation, is wanting it to sort of hide and come out. So we've got to have something to click on. So this is going to seem a little bit strange, but I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to add a checkbox. And I'll explain why. Don't worry. So input type equals checkbox. And I'll give this a class of nav toggle. So all that's done is give me this little checkbox here. Seems a little bit strange, and I agree, it is at the moment. So the whole reason I'm going to be doing this is because I want to do this without any JavaScript. We want to do this CSS only, and we can. It's not that hard. And it's important that I'm putting this right before my navigation. With how the doing this with CSS works, it's really important on the ordering of these two things. So to give you an idea of how this is going to work, let's say that my navigation is actually a display of none. so it disappears. Cool. And I'm going to scroll down here. And what did we call it? We called it nav toggle. So if you don't know, there is a pseudo class. Yeah, pseudo class. You know hover. So hover is a pseudo class. You might know like active and all that. There's also another one called checked. So checked is looking for if a checkbox is checked. And then what we can do is do a little tilde here and say nav. So what this is saying is, as you know, if you don't have a space, so like here with my nav A, this is a link inside my navigation. So if I put this, it's not looking for a nav inside of nav toggle. It's looking for a nav that's a sibling of nav toggle. So my nav toggle is here. Its first sibling right after it. I think it's the first preceding sibling is what this is looking for. So it's looking for, is there a nav right after? There is a nav right after. So what can we do with it? So display block. So if it's checked, my nav, which is right after my nav toggle, should become block when it's checked. So if I click that, there it is. And if I uncheck it, it disappears. So right away, I think you can see the value in this. And I think you get the idea of where I'm going. But you don't want a checkbox, do you? No, we don't want a checkbox. We want something that looks like a hamburger menu. So let's go and make that. And this is, I don't know if where I'm putting this is terribly important. It could be somewhere else, but I'm going to put it down here underneath, and I'll give this. So I'm going to make a label here, and it's going to be a label for my nav toggle, and I need to give it a name. So let's give it a class of nav toggle label, and a label. I'm going to close my label here. And inside of my label, I'm going to add in a span. Close span. So the advantage with a label, and actually in my span for the moment, I'll put a big X. And I just realized something in doing this, so I'm putting my 4 here. When I did my input, we also need to give it an ID. So the ID of this will also be nav toggle. Now I generally, when I say generally, I always do this where my navigation or my input will have an ID and a class. And the reason I like putting both on them is in my CSS, I prefer only working with classes and not with IDs, just for specificity reasons. IDs are much higher in specificity. They can cause some issues with it. I know I'm saying specificity really weird. It's a word I have trouble with. I have a whole video that dives into it a little bit. And you can listen to that if you're curious and just listen to me stumble over it. But basically this is for me to select here. And my ID here is because I want my label and my input to work together. So this nav toggle, so for nav toggle is going to look for an ID. It will not see the class. So now, if I come up and click on here, you'll see that it works. But if I click on the X, it also activates and deactivates it, even though I'm clicking on the X and I'm not clicking in the checkbox itself. So what all that means is I can come up to here and say that my nav toggle has a display of none. We don't need to have that there. I only need to have this. So even though we can't see it, it's still being checked on and off. So that's really, really nice and handy. But I don't actually want this to be an X. We want to do a little bit more with it. So let's do all that. I'm going to keep all of this above my nav, actually. Actually, you know what? For now, for the moment, I think what we'll do is we'll put the X back in here just so we can get it positioned where we want it to. So I'll move the X over to here, and then we'll change our X into the 3 bars. So here I have my nav toggle label. So my nav toggle label, let's see. This is going to have to be a position absolute on here because we want to tell it where it's going to go. Let's just do a top of 0 and a left of 0. So we should see it showing up. There it is. So it shows up right there. Now I want the, let's just give that a margin left of 1em. And the reason I'm doing the margin left of 1em there is just because I gave that margin left of 1em. So I just want these things to line up perfectly. Now I'm going to put a border on this just so we can see what's happening. So I'm going to do a border of 1 pixel solid red. And we can see it looks like that. And I want to be able to center my X perfectly in this space. So I'm going to give it a height of 100% to do that. I'm also going to give it a display of flex. And I know we only have one thing in there. It's because this makes it easier, because then I can use it in align items center, and my X goes right in the middle of the height there. So I need to give it the height, display flex, and then align items center. And there's other ways of centering it that don't require flex, but yeah, that works well. So I think we'll leave that, and I can turn off my border now. So that's in the right spot, but I don't actually want something that's a little X. I want my 3 lines. So to do that, I'm going to use the span, and I'm going to use some pseudo elements on the span. So that's my nav toggle label span. And I'm going to be doing a before and an after on this. Label span before, and my nav toggle label span after. So we're selecting all 3 parts of it. We're selecting the before and after pseudo elements as well as the span itself. So I'm going to start by giving them a width of, I don't know, 2M. Actually, before we do that, I need to make sure they show up. So let's do a display of block on all of these. A background white for now. Now we can worry about that. So height of 2 pixels and a width. I'm gonna guess about 2M, but that might change. 2M is going to be about 30. Yeah, there we go. 32 pixels. So that doesn't look too bad. And I'll do a border radius of 2 pixels. Just around the corners on that. Really subtle because it's not very big, but I think that'll look a little bit nicer. Now I actually only have this one showing up right now. I don't have the other ones. And actually, let's just make this like that so we can see what we're doing a little better. I'm going to do a position relative on here. This is pretty much just for my span here. The before and the after aren't showing up yet, so let's get those to appear. So the easy way to do that is to copy this and paste it there. And I need the content property, and I don't actually want any content, but if we don't have this, it defaults to none and nothing ever shows up. So I need that. Now you can see that got thicker, and it's because they're overlapped, like we have the 3 lines now. Do I need anything else on here? I don't think so. Except I think we're going to need a position absolute. I think we're going to need that. So I'm going to put it on, and now I can select these separately. So we'll start with my before. And let's just move it down. So bottom, I'm taking a random guess, 7 pixels. Good. So that moves the bottom 7 pixels. And so let's take the same thing. But I want my after, and I'm going to switch this to top. I'm happy with that. Good, good, good. And when I click that, it should appear and disappear. And I'm not going to do a fancy animation on all of this. If you do want to see an animated one like this where it turns into an X, I do have another mobile navigation that I built out that takes a look at that, but it uses clip paths and does some other stuff. But overall, I think that looks pretty good, and I'm happy with how it works. So that's cool. So it looks good and it works, but we want to make this look not simply good, but great. We're going to have to use a few transitions on this puppy to do it, because we want to make sort of animation type of things. So we're going to use transitions to make those. Now the thing with transitions is, to be as high performance as possible, you want to limit your transitions to 4 different properties: opacity, scale, translate, and rotate. If you'd like more information on this, I've put a link in the description below. And if not, just trust me on it. It deals with repainting and stuff like that the browsers have to do when you're doing transitions and stuff. So let's go and take out our display none that I put in here before. Not that one. We want to go down onto my navigation. So we want to take that display none out, and I want to go and find this one and take that out too, because I want it to be here. So instead of display none, what I'm going to do, and this is kind of weird, but I'm going to come in here and do a transform scale. Now, the thing with scale is I can put in like a number. So say I did 50, or not 50.5. It will be half the size it originally was. So 0.75 would be 75%, and a 1 in here would be the actual size. But you can actually put two values in here. So if I did a 1 and a 0.5, it's going to smush it but up and down, but this way is staying at 100%. Or if we switch that around, if I say 0.5 comma 1, it's the opposite. It's going to smush it horizontally, but vertically it's staying at 100%. So what I actually want to do in this case is I want to give it 0 here, which is going to crush it all the way down, but I want to keep the width at 100%. Then, when we get to here, I have a transform scale 1 comma 1. So now it's going to look exactly the same as we had before. So there's actually no difference. But the advantage with this is, unlike the display none, is I can do a transition on here. So if I come in with a transition, let's say transform 400 milliseconds, and we'll do an ease in out and see what that looks like. So there we go. So you can see it's transitioning in and out, but obviously we have a problem. It's not transitioning from the right spot. It's growing from over here, and we want it to come down and up from the top. Well, luckily it's not hard to fix. On here, my transform, I can do a transform origin and just write it in top. So the default was pretty much in the center. So now instead it's going to go in from the top. Cool. So already I think that's a lot better, but it's not really what we want. The links look really funny when they get scaled. They're getting like squished and it looks, well, it looks like poop, to be honest. We can make the links fade in as the scaling finishes though. So instead of squishing like this, the links sort of appear into the navigation. So remember the 4 properties that I can do. There's scale, translate, rotate, and opacity. So we're allowed to do our opacity. So let's come down onto here, and I'm going to say that my links here have an opacity of 0. So now if I do that, it just looks like my menu's growing and shrinking. The links are still there. We just can't see them because they have an opacity of 0. So then on here, we can add this. So it's my nav toggle checked tilde nav space A. It's getting a bit more complicated as a selector, but that's what we need. We need our nav links that are inside our nav that are next to or a sibling of my nav toggle when it's checked. And these will have an opacity of 1. So you can see they're there and then they disappear. And so it's working, sort of. But let's go and add in our transition on here. So we can do our transition opacity. And let's do like 250 milliseconds, ease in, out. But I'm also going to do a delay on this. So this is an animation delay. So what that means is take this much time before starting my animation. So now when I click on this, see how the animation when here, it's just finishing up and then they come in. To really illustrate this actually, let's just add a 0 here. So it won't really show that way, but when I go this way, and then we wait and we wait and we wait and we wait, and then eventually they fade in. So it's taking 2,500 milliseconds to 2.5 seconds. Then the animation, this part kicks in. So by having the delay on there, just a short delay, as it comes in it goes. But you'll notice when I shrink it, it's still squishing them. Because the shrinking animation happens right away. There's a delay on it, so that doesn't quite work. Luckily, we can fix this a little bit. So if ever you've done something like adding a transition onto something like this with a nav A and then an A hover, whatever, and you put the transition here, transition, say color, you'll notice that the transition only works in one direction, but not the other one. So what we can do here is this is always on here. So there's always this delay. But when I click this way, I don't want there to be a delay. I only want the delay to come when I'm opening it, not when I'm closing it. So luckily what we can actually do is add the delay here. So let's say we do transition. Actually, I want to copy exactly what we have here onto this one. So this means when it gets checked and it's opening up, we want it to have that delay on it. But when I click this and it's no longer checked, I want it to be a different one. So let's just take out the delay, and maybe we could even speed this up a little bit, 150 milliseconds. Because we need it to fade out pretty fast before it actually starts getting smushed. So now when I click on it this way, there's the delay, and then it all fades in. So it's using this one because it's using the check state. But as soon as I click this, that's no longer checked. So it's no longer checked. It's not going to use this transition. It's going to come up and it's going to use this transition instead. So this transition's much faster and there's no delay on it. So as soon as I click on this, you'll see it's going to fade out, and it's going to fade out quite fast. Which is perfect because we don't see it getting smushed. And I think our timings are actually really good on this, and it looks pretty good. I'm really actually happy with this whole thing and how it's looking right now. So that's really cool and really fun. And there we go, a nice simple way to make a drop-down with absolutely no JavaScript involved. So it looks great on small screens now, but let's make it look good on bigger screens, because to be honest, you know, that looks kind of boring like this. And you know, we have room for navigation, so let's take advantage of all that room and build one in. Now, the width I'm going to use on, I'm going to make a media query, and I'm just going to do it all the way at the bottom so I can put everything in this one media query. So the width on this is going to be really arbitrary. Let's say min width of 800 pixels. I'm just choosing some nice round number. You choose the breakpoint that you're using for your design or that works with your navigation layout and everything. So the first thing is we don't actually need this thing anymore, right? So let's turn that off. So nav toggle label can be a display of none. There we go. That little puppy there is gone. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to set up our header, and the header in this case I'm going to use some CSS grid on it. So one of the nice things about CSS grid is it has sort of done away with the need for container divs. So let's set this up, display grid, and I'm going to make 3 columns on here. So I'm going to do grid template columns. If you've never used these, I do have some videos on these as well. I've been saying that a lot. I'm using a lot of the things that I've used over time to do this. 1FR. So to explain what I'm doing here is I'm setting up 4 columns. FR is a fraction unit, so it's pretty much leftover space. So I want leftover space on the left and right. Auto, the logo, I want it to be in one that's automatically generated, and my navigation is going to go in one. I'll say a minimum of 600 pixels. PX, and at maximum 1FR. I'm wondering if I need to change that. So right away you can actually see my logo is moved over. And I'm going to do inspect here. I'm using, so in the Firefox DevTools, there is this really nice grid inspector. So if I turn that on, we can see the grid lines that are coming up. And I'm going to leave that on for the moment, I think, just because it's going to make visualization of what we're doing a little bit easier. So you can see that those lines are right there. So as I lay things out, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. And I think here, actually, if I click on that, I can display my line numbers and stuff, which will help make a little bit more sense. But I'm going to leave that off until I set this up a bit more. And I'll shrink that down just to give us a bit more room for the moment. So I want to say where my things are actually going on the grid. So let's just say my logo is going grid column 2 span 1, and now it should move over. There we go. So now I can put my grid numbers on. Because my second one here was set to auto and there was nothing inside it, it was just collapsing. There was nothing in there, so it became 0. So that's just why I didn't want to confuse too much. So I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'm saying is I want my logo to start at column 2. So it's starting at the line number 2, and it's going across 1. I could also do this as just a 2/3 to make it take those. And just for example, if I did this as 2/4, it would take up from 2 all the way to 4. But I don't want to do that. I want to do 2 over 3. And what else do I need to do on my logo? I think that's it. And then I can come onto my not dot nav, just my nav, and that one would be grid column of 3 over 4, because I want it to start here and I want it to go up to here. Now the one problem with this is I can't actually see it, and that's just because my nav A currently have an opacity of 0, so opacity of 1, so we can actually see them. Well, actually, it's because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So for my nav here, the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to see how it keeps flashing like that as things go. Now, we did a whole bunch of styles on the nav, and I don't want to have to undo all those styles that I already did, because that's just really annoying. So there's this really nice thing. I can say all, actually, I want to do this above my grid columns here. I'm going to say an all and on set. And look at that, I have a navigation again. So what this is doing is it's taking off all the things that I did up before when I did the mobile version of it. It's just take everything off of my nav. So now I can actually see it. And it's going on the grid column from 3 to 4. So that is perfecto. Just as a word of caution, the all isn't a fully implemented CSS feature yet. At the time of making this video, it won't work in IE or in Edge. Though it is under consideration for Edge at the moment. So let's come on my nav UL next and say a display of flex on here, so they'll go next to each other instead of how they were. So there we go, they're that way. I think on here I should be able to do a flex, not a flex, justify content flex end. There we go, just to move it all the way to the right side. And let's put a border. Let's just say border 1 pixel solid red. I just want to see what the height of this is right now. So on the nav itself, again, I'm just going to use this trick, display flex, which will stretch that out. Actually, okay, we'll do on here justify content flex end, and we'll do an align items center. So that should move that over to there. Perfecto. Good. You can see that there is an extra bit of height here right now. That's because my list items have the a margin bottom on them, so I can take those that margin bottom off right now. So nav li margin left, let's make it a bit bigger. Let's say 3M, margin bottom 0. There we go. So they're a little bit more spread out and they're perfectly centered in that space. Oh, and just to look at the 1FR thing. So the 1FR is just taking up like available space and shrinking. And actually, I realized my min-max here actually isn't going to work properly. Let's say I make that 3. I think it'll work a little bit better. Maybe even has to be bigger. There we go. I think that's working out a little bit better. Just saying that of the available space, so the available space is this. So this should try and be about 3 times bigger than this one or that one. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. And then it gets to the minimum width of 600. And then right before we get too narrow, look, it goes over. And then we get our drop down. Good, good, good. So that's looking pretty good. The only thing left that I want to do is add in my little hover effect that we're going to put into the navigation here. So let's just scroll down, and I'm only going to do this on my full screen one here. So my nav a before, right? Yeah, my nav a before. We'll do it on the before. So as with all pseudo elements, we do need to give it a content of nothing, or they don't always get nothing, but most of the time when they're design elements, they always get a one of nothing. I'll go with a height of like 5 pixels. I think that's what I used last time. Background of black. So there we go. We can see our line is already there. Let's give it a position of absolute, which will break it. because let's just give them top of -1m. Let's see where that puts it. Left of 0, right of 0. Let's see what happens now. And position relative on here. There we go. Okay, that brought them back. Good, good, good. Had me a little worried there. Let's make this a bit smaller, 0.75. Either bigger or smaller, but I think it'll work out well where I have it now. And I'm going to use the exact same trick I used last time. So before, and when I say last time, I mean I'm going to use the same trick. I'm going to get rid of these grid lines and everything. This trick here, where we use the scale to smush and grow things, since it's a nice little way of getting it. So on here, I can bring in a transform scale. The last time we did a 1, 0 because we wanted to shrink the height. This time I want to shrink only the width of it. So I'm going to do a 0, 1. And we might as well add the transition in right away. Transition, transform, ease in, out, I don't know, 250 milliseconds, and we'll see how that looks. And so then my nav a hover before transform scale 1, 1. And let's see, look at that, isn't that nice? It works out perfectly. So when I hover, it's growing. Now, last time I did this, when I was using transitions on the left and the right, and so if I wanted it to grow from the center, I had to do like a 50%, 50% thing, and then like it was a bit more complicated, and if I wanted to move it around. So the nice thing now is, if I do want to change this, I can just do a transform origin, like we did before, origin, left, and then my line will grow in from the left, or I could put right, and it will grow in from the right. And if you want it, instead of being on the top, you want it to be on the bottom, I could do bottom, and now my line is coming in from the bottom. So I'm going to put that back to top, and I'm just going to take this off because I sort of like this one that's growing out from the middle like that. So we'll leave it just like that. Whew, that was a long one, but we made it, and I think it was worth it. I'm pretty happy with the end result, but if you have any suggestions on things I could have done better, or just questions about my process or anything like that, please leave a comment about it in the description below. Also, if you have any suggestions for other videos, feel free to leave those. I love getting them. I have a really long to-do list now, but it's all from you guys suggesting stuff that you'd like to see. So if you have a cool idea, I'd gladly add it into my list. While I have your attention, just in case you don't know, I do also have a newsletter. I started it maybe about a month and a half ago. It comes out every single Sunday, but instead of big long videos like this, it's little short snippets. I like to think of it as the things that don't have enough substance to them to make an actual video about. So hopefully things you can read in 3 minutes or less for the most part. Mostly CSS tips and tricks type of stuff, and maybe a little bit of design thrown in there as well. An example, I haven't done one on this, but just the whole all property with the onset there, that would be the type of thing just focused on that I would make a newsletter about. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go check out the link to that in the description below. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, you just watched a really long video, you're still sitting here through the outro, props to you. Really, so hopefully you like the content. I'm guessing you did if you're still here. So just please consider subscribing. It's a new video like this every single week. So hit that little subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Before we wrap this one up, just a really big thank you to all my patrons. It's through your support that all of these videos are possible. So just thank you so much for showing the faith in me to support me. I really, really do appreciate it. And well, just a big thank you to everybody. Honestly, this channel is getting bigger and bigger all the time, and just you guys are all really awesome. So thank you so much to everyone. And don't forget, until next time, to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.